we actually have some studs to pick between for Week 7 in NFL DFS because we've got Devontae Adams, DeAndre Hopkins, the Seattle Seahawks wide receivers. We've got the Atlanta Falcons wide receivers, Alvin Kamara, Zeke Elliott, all these guys available on the Week 7 main slate, which means we're excited, but we also got to prioritize those studs and decide how we are ranking them for Week 7 in DFS. So let's dive on in and break it on down. Welcome on into the Heat Check Fantasy Podcast, powered by numberFire. That's right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network and numberFire.com. My name is Jim Sonis. I am a senior writer and analyst for numberFire.com. Joined here, as always, by Brandon Gadula. He is the managing editor for numberFire. Brandon, we are on to Week 7. Pretty fun slate on tap, potentially. How you doing?
I'm good. I'm a little frazzled looking over this slate. It took me a long time yesterday and even this morning to narrow things down. When we were talking on Monday doing the recap show, I saw all these totals being posted in the 50s. I was like, oh, Week 7 is going to be great. But as we were talking before the show, that like a 50-point total, 54-point total, whatever it is, it's not quite what it used to be. So
yeah.
Still kind of learning how to adjust to that. And so, I mean, from a total perspective, historically, this week looks amazing, but a lot of those games at the top still do have question marks.
Meh. You may think they do. I don't. Like, what's the question mark for Green Bay, Houston? Name one.
That's not the game I was talking about.
Oh, okay, cool. David Bakhtiari being banged up is a slight concern, but hey, we can boogie there for sure. I feel really good about the 3 games. Green Bay, Houston. I feel good about Seattle, Arizona. Feel good about Atlanta versus Detroit, despite the fact that total is coming down. I still think those games are good. I am just concerned about finding value because it's hard on this slate, and we were complaining about there being too many good mid-range running backs previously. Now all the studs are here, and it's like, okay, well, we may have cried wolf a bit too much, and maybe we should have been not complaining about all those mid-range running backs because I can't find a running back below 71 who I actively want to use this week. And it's pretty tough. I can't find more than like 2 or 3 receivers below 6,000 I actively want to use. So it's going to be a tough week where we need to prioritize the studs, but also look for value. The good thing, I think, is that it's a trust the process type week for us because, at least for me, my process revolves around game stacks. There are games that I want to stack, and there are logical ways to stack said games. So I feel good about it in that sense. So we're going to break things down, talk about this slate, and get you ready for week number 7. But first, as a reminder, the FanDuel Podcast Network Listener League is back for week number 7. You can get your entries in right now while you're listening. Go to FanDuel.com/league/Listener League. It's a $5 entry with 3 entries max. There is no rake here, meaning FanDuel makes $0.00 off this contest. All the entry fees go right back to you, the listeners. To enter, go to FanDuel.com/league/Listener League. That's FanDuel.com/league/Listener League. There's also a link to enter on the podcast post up on numberFire.com. So if you go to the Week 7 preview post, up on numberFire for the podcast, there will be a link there. If you're listening on YouTube right now, there is a link to enter in the Week 6 recap post. You can go there, or just go to FanDuel.com/league/Listener League to get yourself entered. And I think the key questions for me around this Week 7 slate for our slate overview there are 2 questions. Is A, how do we prioritize the studs? And B, does value exist? And I don't mean value in the sense that will there be guys...
Thing?
What's that?
Sounds like an existential question.
I mean, right? Exactly. I don't mean value in the sense that will this guy pay off his salary? I don't mean will this $5,000 running back score 10 points? I don't care. I don't want that. Do they have the upside to be worthy of, to actually like move the needle? And to me, the baseline is like 20 FanDuel points. If I can't get a player realistically in my head to 20 FanDuel points, it'll be hard for me to trust them in daily fantasy. Brandon, what are the key questions for you for this slate?
Yeah, the value one's the big one, but I also think, and this sounds a little silly, but I think tight end is like its whole own conversation, and it's something that I don't say we gloss over, but we definitely spend more time looking at running backs, receivers, and quarterbacks. At least I do.
Yeah.
We have Travis Kelce on the slate. George Kittle gets the Patriots. You'd have to think that the narrative means that George Kittle's going to get a whole lot of attention.
Especially if you've been reading Bill Belichick quotes this week about George Kittle. Like, I kind of think he wants to like live with George Kittle in like some kind of bro cave. Like, I think he just wants to be in his presence.
Yeah. So like, I think Travis Kelce to me this week is how I probably should have viewed Derrick Henry last week, with just the one guy who can really, and I understand that the ceiling for a tight end is generally somewhat capped, but if Kelsey's putting up 20, how many other tight ends realistically can you project to get to 15? Someone's going to do it, but we don't know who, and that's how tight end works. So I think Travis Kelce is his whole own conversation for this week for me.
I think the tough part for me with Kelce specifically is that there are so many studs at more predictable and higher ceiling positions that I would rather use.
Yes.
So Kelce, you're right, is like the odds that you probably have this in your simulations, but like the odds that Kelce is the number one scoring tight end are probably higher than any other player at their respective position, I would assume. And that there's a lot of value in that. And I think we could see a situation where he's like a standard deviation above everyone else eventually, but he's $7,900, and that is $600 more than DK Metcalf. It is $500 more than Tyler Lockett. It's right beneath Calvin Ridley, Julio Jones. It's right beneath Tyreek Hill, and maybe that one's less of a discussion, but like it's tough, especially because as much as I have faith in the Broncos, I don't like that game as much as I like Seahawks. Shush. Shush.
Oh, you should have heard. Oh, you should have heard.
We had a big fight about this yesterday about how I was saying Drew Lock is good enough to not suck and keep that game semi-competitive. But if I'm making one lineup, I'm not going to be loading up on that game. This is a multi-entry thing where I think, hey, they could push it enough where Patrick Mahomes has to throw in the fourth quarter. Like, they're not going to lay down like the Jets, is what I'm saying.
Which is basically what I was saying. The odds that it just is a huge shootout, I think it's low. I understand how it gets there.
Yeah.
I don't think Drew Lock is terrible. I saw the passes last week that almost converted. I get it.
Did you see the ones that did convert? Like his beautiful pass to Tim Patrick on the sidelines?
The 10 completions.
Yeah, but there were 10 beautiful completions. Not a single dud among them. I was sitting on my couch, jaw agape. Is that a word? I don't know. Whatever. Jaw open, gawking at Drew Lock with the dimes he was unleashing and going 10 for 24 against the Patriots.
Yes. Well, going back to Travis Kelce quickly, I understand the salary. I understand the salary relative to wide receivers, but positional scarcity comes into play.
Yeah.
And you can ruin a lot of good lineups by rostering the wrong tight end. Yes, yeah. Travis Kelce still has a low floor because that's the way tight end works, even for Kelce. I just think that I need to take a long look at him relative to this slate much more than I typically do for a tight end.
It just makes me so anxious to think about passing up on guys like Metcalf and Lockett and all those guys. It's tough.
It does. But yeah. I was also scared to pass up Travis Kelce and say I'm going to play Austin Hooper in like a high percentage of my lineups.
Yeah, that's a fair question. All right, so let's take a look at some injuries here for week number 7. Right before we started recording today, it was reported by Tom Pelissero that Michael Thomas tweaked his hamstring in practice on Wednesday, which is good and fun. We were talking about all the studs, and I guess one's gone again potentially. We'll touch on the Saints in the Bookmaker section. It's not an injury, but Le'Veon Bell is uncertain to be active this week for his Chiefs debut. Andy Reid said that on Wednesday, which was pretty upfront about him or from him. The problem is that game is in the afternoon, so we won't know before lock whether Bell is inactive or not. We'll talk about the Chiefs in the Bookmaker section. Joe Mixon missed practice on Wednesday due to a foot injury. He got hurt in week 6, but returned and did finish the game. We'll talk about the Bengals in the trend section. Deontay Johnson got in a full practice on Friday. He missed week 6 and left weeks 3 and 5 early due to injury. Looks like we'll have the full-blown Steelers in week 7, so we'll talk about them in the Bookmaker section. Raheem Mostert is on injured reserves, and so is Tevin Coleman. So it looks like Jerick McKinnon and JaMychal Hasty will lead the way this week. Jeffrey Wilson Jr. was limited in practice on Wednesday and could be active as well. We're looking for value, Brandon. I don't think this is the place to look for it here. Can we get the value here, or is it too muddy of a situation?
It's muddy. If there's only two healthy backs, that actually helps a lot. But I think this is probably the game that you and I seem to be lowest on out of the whole main slate for the most part. I mean, McKinnon at 55 is interesting. I might have some sprinkles, but he's definitely not somebody I'm going to prioritize.
Yeah, I think based on the usage last week, I know that McKinnon lost a fumble, and that's probably why Hasty got work. But like, if I can't say with certainty that McKinnon will be even the 1A in a two-back system, it's hard for me to get there. And like, he's 600 or so less than some guys who actually have a path to a good game. So I think that's why I'd be okay passing it up. The Broncos had Noah Fant and KJ Hamler back at practice on Wednesday, meaning they are a lock to score 30 points against the Chiefs. We'll talk about the Broncos in the Bookmaker section. Sounds like Sam Darnold may return this week for the Jets. Oh boy, he was limited Wednesday, as was Brashad Perriman, who apparently now has an ankle injury in addition to his knee injuries. Fun stuff. Would Darnold playing impact the way you view the Bills offense? And the reason that's relevant is because what we saw last week, we talked about it last week before or during the show, was if the Jets don't do anything, then the Dolphins may not do anything in the second half. And that's exactly what happened. Like, Fitz got benched, eventually permanently.
The Jets were so bad that's what led to Tua getting.
Honestly, bless the Jets if they get us Tua. I love Ryan Fitzpatrick. I love Tua more. So bless the Jets. That was the Jets' revenge on Ryan Fitzpatrick. So it was their own revenge game. Okay, anyway, talk about the Jets. I got sidetracked.
So Darnold playing would impact a little bit the way that I view the Bills. If I'm building 150 lineups, I'm going to have some Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs. Just because Diggs can score twice in the first half. Allen can probably go for 4 touchdowns in like 2.5 to 3 quarters. The odds that happens are very low, but it would be easier for me to stomach if Darnold plays. But even if Darnold plays, that's not anything you can really stack up.
Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs do fit the mold of what we discussed a couple weeks ago, where like they're heavy favorites, but they are efficient enough in the volume that they get where like they could still pay off even if they don't have the foot on the gas the entire game, because Allen runs and Diggs gets downfield targets in a very efficient manner. So they do fit that. But like if I have 20 lineups, I'm not touching them. I might not have any Bills outside of maybe the defense in those lineups.
Yeah.
But if it's 150, I think it's always worthy. It's worth it to get Josh Allen. Because if let's say Josh Allen shockingly fumbles and the Jets house it, that increases the odds that they have to push the entire game. So honestly, like if you're using Josh Allen, you kind of hope he messes up and gives the opposing team points. So
that's fair. Yeah.
I think if you're doing 150, it's always worth some Josh Allen. If you're doing 20, I wouldn't this week just because I can't project the Jets to do enough to force them to keep going, even though the Bills are going to be really good in this game. Marvin Jones has a knee injury and did not practice on Wednesday. They're facing the Falcons here, so we want exposure to this team, but we don't know what to expect here. So how would Marvin Jones being banged up impact your view of the Lions offense?
I'd feel better about Kenny Golladay getting the majority of the downfield work. I already feel good about that, but taking away Marv, I think that leads to a safer downfield projection for Golladay. Outside of Golladay, though, it's really been TJ Hawkinson. He's at 17% of the targets in games that Galladay's played. It's kind of been those two. Maybe you make the case for more receiving work for DeAndre Swift. I'm not buying in fully to the DeAndre Swift game. 38% of the snaps. We know Adrian Peterson's still going to steal 10 to 12 carries, get some goal line work whenever they're there. So I can't really get there with Swift, but usually losing someone like Marv lowers me on an offense, but I think it's so concentrated as it is that I'd be fine going to Golladay and Hawkinson anyway.
Yeah, I think that because Golladay and Hawkinson are getting the high leverage work and like they are objectively good enough to overcome better coverage, I can still go to them and it would bump me up on them. It would bump me down on Stafford though at 73, just because like Marv he's been bad. He hasn't been a contributor this year. I'll phrase it that way.
That's fair.
But like he's still a presence on the field. And if you go from Marvin Jones to Quintez Cephas or Marvin Hall or whatever it is, that is objectively a downgrade. And I think Stafford is interesting at 73 because I need salary flexibility, and he does help give me that. I would be lower on him if Marvin's. I would still use him. I will say that. Like a 20 lineup thing, I would still use Stafford at times, but it would lower me on him.
Yeah, I think it has to. I keep thinking ahead to something I'll probably talk about, and you talked about it too, but I think one way to get some salary is maybe to go with a receiver in the flex spot.
Yeah. We talked about this on Slack yesterday. We're like, I don't know the number of lineups I filled out for a main slate this year. 0.0 of them have used a non-running back in the flex. I know that's probably not the best process, but I don't care. That's the way I want to play things. I've not used a single non-running back in the flex. I'm going to do that at some point this week. I know that's going to happen because there just aren't like actively want to use.
Yeah.
So I'm going to do it this week, but yeah, I think you're right. Not only will the Cowboys not have Dak, they won't have Tyron Smith, they won't have Lyle Collins, they won't have Joe Looney, but their backup left tackle, Brandon Knight, is also out for week 7. He had been starting in place of Tyron Smith, so the Cowboys are on their third string left tackle. Seems good. Zach Martin also has a concussion and didn't practice Wednesday. So are we just all in on the Washington defense here at $3,800?
I think that makes a lot of sense. My sort of addition to this is like, I don't know how much we're going to talk about the Cowboys offense, but
I have no real incentive to talk about the pass catchers because I don't like that game and I want my receivers to be in really good games. And it's not like Amari is free. He's $7,800, so I can safely avoid Amari there. I think Zeke is way too high salaried. I know that he's getting a lot of volume. It's really good volume. But, what if he fumbles again like he did twice and we see more Tony Pollard again? Like, if we're talking from a game theory perspective, Zeke's probably a great play. But, I don't know if I care enough to actually do that personally. What about you?
It's really difficult. These are some of the best DFS assets, some of the best just players, skill position players in the league. But Dalton's just been, he's not even throwing it deep or anything to give it a shot. His ADOT's 5.9 yards downfield. His downfield attempt rate's 12%. League average is about 17%. So I'm not saying zero. I guess the bigger question is I know 20 lineups we're not going here, but at 150, do you see yourself stacking this game?
No.
Okay.
So we were talking about cross-off games and games that we're just I don't want any exposure to anyone in that game. First game we crossed off was 49ers Patriots. I actually put this one second on the list. I think Bills Jets is a half cross-off because the Bills, again, they're going to do well. They're going to play well. I just don't think they have the best ceilings as a result of the Jets offense. So I would say this is the second cross-off, the second worst game on this slate to me.
I'm a little higher, I think, on this game than you. I would put any Jets game as less stackable.
Okay, fair.
Fair. But yeah, this is probably third worst.
I can talk myself into Antonio Gibson. I can talk myself, obviously, into Terry McLaurin. Terry McLaurin's just a good play. I don't need to talk myself into him, but he works. So I can talk myself into plays, but I don't know.
What even McLaurin's 71? That's difficult.
Yeah.
I think it's justified, but this game could just get real ugly. Terry
McLaurin going for 101 is 19 FanDuel points, I think. That's fine. But is he going to exceed that? I don't know. Probably not. Not because again, this is not related to him. It's related to game environment.
Yeah.
And I can't expect the Cowboys to keep the same pace they had with that. Because if they kept the same pace, this is a great pace game. I just don't expect Andy Dalton and Kyle Allen to fuel a shootout. So That's why it's tough for me there. So let's talk about some fun games, Brandon. Move into our trends discussion here for week number 7, starting off with the Atlanta Falcons, because Julio back, baby. He blew up in week number 6. He's back on the slate here in week 7 against the Lions in a really fun game. So Brandon, talk to me about this Falcons offense and what you see with Julio in the mix.
Yeah, this is one of the best games on the slate with the Falcons coming off a big performance. So I wanted to dig in here. I talked about this on the Monday recap podcast, but it's definitely not something that I want to forget about by any means. And honestly, as I was doing this, I was like, the Monday pod might be more helpful than this Thursday pod, because we go through everything that happened. We recap like recent usage, and I think, this is something I already talked about, but it's worth talking about again, because the Falcons with Julio Jones are a very, very, very good offense. That shouldn't really surprise us, but for anyone who thinks Julio's not quite himself, I mean, the data kind of says otherwise. Julio's played the majority of snaps in 3 games. He didn't do that in 3 games, missed 2. Was it like 25% in another game? That apparently has mattered. Matt Ryan in games without Julio Jones playing those elevated snaps, he's at negative 0.02 passing net expected points per dropback. The NFL average is a positive 0.14, so he's way off the pace there. In 3 games with Julio, positive 0.46. So basically, that's the difference between being the most efficient passer in the NFL and being Brett Rippon in terms of efficiency.
Wow.
So, I mean, Matt Ryan's going to play better without Julio over a larger sample than Brett Rippon has played, but that's for context. That's basically what we're looking at. So, the most relevant sample, of course, is these games with Julio Jones, and in those games, Calvin Ridley does lead the team with a 22% target share. Julio is second at 20%, and then Russell Gage is at 19%. So it's a very concentrated offense. In this offense, that's actually led to elevated target numbers, which I do put stock into. I used to kind of look only at target shares, but we know teams have different intentions. They want to throw the ball more or less. And that's worked out to 9.7 targets for Calvin Ridley, 8.7 for Julio, 8.3 for Russell Gage. And that's despite the fact that Atlanta's just kind of just above average in early down first half pass rate and in overall one-score pass rate. Part of the reason is that the attempts are up is that the Falcons are 3rd in raw seconds per play and 10th in situation neutral pace, according to Football Outsiders. Detroit, for what it's worth, is 15th in situation neutral pace. Matt Ryan's thrown it downfield, 21% downfield attempt rate, 9.0 yard ADOT, 365 air yards per game, which is tops in the NFL through 5 games. So this game, pretty easy to stack on both sides, honestly, but more specifically for the Atlanta side for me, I think it's going to be hard to figure out if you can only play one between Calvin Ridley and Julio Jones, who it is. I'm going to side with Ridley, but I think the bigger question here is outside of those two, which is probably close to a coin flip. I mean, what do you think about this Atlanta offense? Russell Gage, Hayden Hurst, Todd Gurley. Any interest there?
Gage, no. I know the 8.3 targets per game is very good. However, 12 of those came in week 1, and he hasn't really done anything since. He is at, I guess he had 9 in week 2 with Julio, but then 4 last week. So that's a tough sell for me. Hayden Hurst in those games, just like raw targets, 5, 8, and 4. That's fine, Downfield work 1, 2, and 0. Gurley, I can feel pretty good about avoiding because, again, I think that I am more willing to be lenient on the you must score 20 points discussion this week, just because using a lower salary play gives me upside elsewhere, I think, this week, and I'm more willing to do that this week than usual. But Gurley is 66. That's 500 less than Kareem Hunt. I'd rather spend down for a different quarterback than accept that gap between those two guys. So Gurley, he makes sense to an extent, but again, am I going to regret not using Todd Gurley? Probably not, right?
Yeah, probably not. I mean, he's been below average in terms of rushing success rate. This is why I honestly hate to watch film and put stock into what I see, because whenever he had that quote unquote long touchdown run.
Yeah.
He didn't look particularly good on it. I think
long touchdown.
It was like
jog.
40 yards. So like that stuff sticks in your mind. And it's hard to avoid that. And we just know even without that, the yardage upside is still relatively low, even though he's getting a high floor of, opportunities. I will have some Todd Gurley just because of the state of running back. But
let me ask you to get like a state of the race here from you. Would you rather go with Todd Gurley or David Johnson? I think both of them have similar issues where I think there's a ceiling on their usage. So I think that's my concern.
Like a cap ceiling, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I'd probably. Gosh, this is.
Well, I think it's tough because I think they're in the same tier. I think that they are very similar plays. I think I prefer David Johnson because I think I think the odds that he exceeds my perceived usage ceiling are higher than Gurley's.
Yeah. I also feel better in that game just being more back and forth.
Yeah, that's fair too.
Oh my gosh. They just get like 18 carries and like 60 yards.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's why I'm okay avoiding Gurley, even though like the odds he pays off are fine, but the odds he burns me are low. So I think he just has a small range of outcomes. I'm okay not having those players on a slate where there are so many guys with upside. Hayden Hurst, like for game stacks, I think I actually could, just because tight end is so bad, and like I think that I might actively try harder to just use tight ends in the games that I'm stacking. Like, I know Robert Tanyan missed practice on Wednesday. Does he make sense in a vacuum? No, not at $6,000, not at all. But if I'm stacking that game, sure, I just want to include him there. Same thing for Jordan Akins. If he's able to get back this week, he's $4,800 or $4,700.
48.
Like if I'm stacking that game, sure. I think I might just try harder to get my tight ends being game stacks, and I'm going to be stacking this game. So TJ Hawkinson obviously is the preferred route, but like Hurst would make sense too. I don't know if that's like a bad way to view it or not, but that might be the way I view this week.
No, I think that makes sense. I think Gurley actually kind of fits in that same logic where he's like going to be. I'm going to stack this game a lot of ways. Yeah. I think Gurley can be involved in case he like walks into 2 touchdowns.
So it'll be like Derrick Henry a couple weeks ago where he gets 2 touchdowns and still doesn't hit 20 points. Like that's so within Gurley's range of outcomes.
It is. It certainly is. Yeah. But I also don't feel great about, like you said at the top of the show, value running backs going for big games, which is why I think I'm both okay with Gurley in some sprinkles, but also okay just targeting some volatile wide receivers in the flex and hope that they go off as well.
I agree. I think that's the right way to view things here. So let's move on to my first trend and talk about another really fun game, and that's the Packers against the Texans. I personally view this as being the best game. Maybe that's off of me, but the Houston side of things pretty straightforward. The Texans, good solid offense. We can give a bump to Brandon Cooks with Will Fuller likely seeing more Jair Alexander. So I think the Texans are pretty easy to dissect. The Packers have had a lot of moving pieces, though, so I wanted to expand on them here. Specifically, we've got 2 full games with Devontae Adams, and in those games, Adams has 38% of the team's targets. He is at 13.5 per game, which is bonkers. That's in addition to 27% of the deep targets and 33% of the red zone targets. He's a great option, and I think that he's the top receiver on this slate, even in a matchup with Bradley Roby. The problem is that things are pretty spread out after him in those games. Both Aaron Jones and Marquez Valdez-Scantling are at 15% of the targets in those games, which is 5.5 per game. Jones is at 24 adjusted opportunities per game in those 2 games, and that's not great for someone at $8,500, but we know it's a great matchup. He's getting a lot of targets, and so many of his touches are high-leverage ones that I think that I like him a lot, despite the fact that the usage for Jones is not what you expect for a running back at that salary. MVS is number 3 for me. The overall target share is bad, but he's getting 2 deep targets per game with Devontae. He will get to play indoors. And again, if Roby does take a couple of targets away from Devontae, those could go to MVS. So I think that in looking at this game, I think like if we're trying to rank the stud receivers, I think that Devontae is number one, even when you consider salary. I think that Aaron Jones is a top 3 or 4 running back for me this week, even though, again, the usage could be better. I think that MVS works as a low salaried wide receiver, but he's not a priority. How are you viewing this game? Any deviations for you there?
No, I think that's pretty much where I am. Devontae's obviously an awesome play. I like Aaron Jones. I'm historically low on Aaron Jones, but I do have Aaron Jones actually as one of my player picks because there are like 4 running backs I feel good with in terms of like that I would say I love them this week. So it's Jones and Adams for me. And then I think the biggest question mark is how heavy you go at Will Fuller in this matchup.
Well, I think I go heavier at Cooks.
But I'm saying, I'm with you. But like,
okay,
how heavy?
So I'm going to stack this game, and like the way that I do it is I just do combinations. So I'm naturally going to wind up having enough Will Fuller because I want to stack Rodgers with Adams with Fuller, and then I want to stack Rodgers with Jones with Fuller. So naturally, I'm going to have Will Fuller. And like if those lineups bust because Alexander does well against him, that's fine. Whatever. I have Brandon Cooks lineups available too. So like let's say I have 10 game stacks of this game. I probably have 4 Will Fuller lineups in those 10, 4 Cooks, maybe 5 Cooks, and then 1 or 2 David Johnsons.
Yeah, it's weird to be heavier on Cooks than Fuller. I understand the matchup situation. So
it's not even the matchup. It's also because like I think Cooks is one of the very few lower salaried receivers who doesn't suck. Yeah. And Fuller 69, Cooks is 59. I think that salary saving is enough when I know that Cooks does also have a path to a good ceiling.
Yeah. So I'm with you. I think this game is pretty easy to figure out like the best ways to stack. And honestly, there aren't too many ways for this to go with tertiary, quaternary options, if you will, kind of taking over all of the production.
And I will say, I'm not avoiding Will Fuller because of the matchup. Like, Will Fuller is a top-flight receiver and can beat anyone. I'm just saying it will push me to have more Brandon Cooks than I usually would. I want to make that clear because I'm not going to avoid Will Fuller against anyone, personally.
Yes.
Other thing I wanted to ask was, how are you ranking Watson relative to Rodgers? I have Watson over Rodgers. What about you?
Watson rates out really well. He kind of always does. I probably would just go Watson here.
Okay, cool.
Even though that's, you always prefer. I never play enough Aaron Rodgers, so it's probably a personal bias of mine.
I mean, it's been fine though. Outside of the first a couple weeks this year, it's been fine to do that. So I think Watson's a better play here. So let's move on to a game that's kind of fun because it does give us some under-salaried players, I think, personally. Talk me through Bengals versus the Browns, because the Bengals here are getting a plus matchup, and that's always a fun thing because we weirdly get a lot of volume out of this passing game, and I'm intrigued by it for sure.
Yeah, so when I was talking about like games with high totals not being necessarily locks, this is one of those I was alluding to, not necessarily like Packers, Texans. The total now is 50.5. So like usually that means this should be a good game, but it's not like the sexiest stack necessarily. So I wanted to dig into this one a little bit closer. Look at the Bengals specifically against non-top 12 pass defenses based on numberFire's metrics. Now, this is already a divisional rematch, and that's a little bit scary, but as Jim always reminds me, that matters more for quarterbacks who are dependent on efficiency, and Joe Burrow is more of a high-volume slinger than that. He had the 61 pass attempts, 3 touchdowns against the Browns in week 2. I'm obviously not expecting that level of passing again, but Burrow has been airing it out like crazy to start the season. He has 291 air yards or more in all but one game. He's averaging 352 per game, which is third highest among all quarterbacks. And he's played 3 games against top 12 adjusted pass defenses based on numberFire's metrics. In those, he's averaged 14.1 FanDuel points per game, 230 passing yards per game, and has 0 passing touchdowns in those. The Browns are 25th against the pass right now, and in 3 games against defenses outside the top 12, he's averaged 25 FanDuel points per game, 309 passing yards with 300 or more in every game, and 2 passing touchdowns per game. So It's totally viable to understand and view Burrow as matchup dependent as a rookie. And I think that we can get access to a good matchup here. We also kind of have another trend here in this offense, which is T. Higgins and his increased role. T. Higgins is a boss. He was one of my favorite receivers coming out, and I'm thankful to hit on somebody for once. But we've seen his role grow since the start of the season. He had a 9% target share in week 2, but since then he's had at least a 19.4% target share in every game since. That's equaled at least 7 targets per game in each of those games. Along with that, he's had 5, 4, 2, and 1 downfield targets over the past 4 weeks. It is a little bit concerning that those are dropping down, but 2 of those do come against those top 12 opponents. But in those 4 games overall, Tyler Boyd still leads the team with a 24% target share, 8.8 targets per game, 2.5 downfield per game. Higgins is second at 22%. He's getting 8 targets per game, 3 downfield. AJ Green's still involved with 15% of targets, 2 downfield targets per game. I looked into it. A lot of his targets just aren't catchable, so I don't know how much of it's AJ Green and how much of it is just a poor connection so far with Joe Burrow. But I think Higgins is perhaps the best salaried receiver on the slate, at least the best low salaried receiver. We also have Joe Mixon if he's healthy, or Giovanni Bernard if not. So I like this game. It's not the one that jumps out first, but both teams are top 12 in situation neutral pace according to Football Outsiders. So I like this game. I like the Bengals. They're very affordable. So what are your thoughts on this one?
Well, I was going to say, before you said this, I was going to say buy or sell the statement that T. Higgins is a top 2 receiver on this slate considering salary. So you said, so we agree. And you modified that by saying the best low salary receiver, which I 100% agree with. The reason that I wasn't going to say number 1 salary considered is because of DK Metcalf. I think he's just his salary is pretty egregious, I think, at 73. So I would say Higgins is top 2. It's either him or Metcalf. I agree. I think that if I have a single lineup, T. Higgins, Kareem Hunt stack will be in that. I think that before I even care about the Houston Green Bay game, before I care about Seattle, Arizona, they might be the first 2 players I lock in. That's how good I feel about them personally. I think that they're tremendous options this week.
Yeah, I mean, I feel really good with Higgins getting that work, but I also I don't mind Tyler Boyd. He's
Boyd's a good play too. You're very right. Yeah, absolutely.
So, I mean, I think that that's a very natural pivot away from T. Higgins if he does wind up being very popular.
I was checking fan share because I was worried about that. He is getting some buzz, but not to the point where I'd expect him to be prohibitively popular.
Yeah, I mean, usually with wide receivers, I just start to worry when they're top 3 in popularity. At that rate, there have to be better pivots. That could happen, but I like Higgins. I like Joe Burrow this week. I've liked him for a few weeks now. And like I said, he's been really good against weaker pass defenses, which is what he gets. So honestly, this is probably going to be the first place I look outside the top 3 games, at least at this point on Thursday.
Yeah, I think that's probably right. Because like I said, I love the Hunt Higgins stack. I think that Hunt with Boyd works really well too. So I agree. I think you're justified in being high in this game, and I think that you're justified in viewing Higgins as being one of the best receiver plays in the slate. And based on what I'm seeing as of right now, I don't expect Higgins to be prohibitively popular, so I think we fire away. It looks like Cooks is more likely to be scary in that sense, and if they're using Cooks, they're less likely to use Higgins, so, why not?
Yeah. But, hey, maybe this is a week where you get both. Just flex one of them.
Porque no los dos. Absolutely. Let's move on to that Seattle versus Arizona game and talk about, the Cardinals, because we know how to handle the Seahawks. You use Russ, you use Metcalf, you use Lockett, and you log out. That's how you do things there. But the Cardinals have had more movements this year, and that does change the outlook on some players. Specifically, Christian Kirk hasn't always been healthy, and it seems like he does make a big impact on this offense because Kirk didn't play in week 3. And in that game, Kyler Murray was at 0.03 passing net expected points per dropback, despite facing a bad defense. The league average is 0.14, so well below that. That was a letdown. But in 5 games with Kirk, Murray's passing net expected points per dropback is 0.17, and again, that's a little bit above the league average. That can work, and that can support high usage pass catchers, and when you combine it with Murray's rushing, it can make him a super valuable DFS play. It also increases my confidence the Cardinals can score points enough to force the Seahawks to throw late in the game. So I think that everybody benefits when Christian Kirk plays. He also doesn't alter DeAndre Hopkins' usage too much. In the 5 games with Kirk, Hopkins has 31% of the overall targets, 22% of the deep targets, and 33% of the red zone targets. Christian Kirk has 15% of the overall targets, but 35% of the deep targets. So you know where the high leverage stuff is going. It's going to Kirk for the most part. To me, with that usage in this game, that's enough for me to put Hopkins high on my list. I don't think I'm as high as I may have been earlier in the week because I like the high leverage volume from the Atlanta and the Seattle receivers more than I like Hopkins. So I think I'm going to wind up being lower on Hopkins than I thought, but like he's justifiable at his salary for sure. He's behind Devontae Adams, and I think that I'm going to put him behind the Falcons and the Seahawks receivers too. Kirk is good for game stacks. I don't know how I view him outside of game stacks. I'll talk to you about that because you tend to have a good read on Christian Kirk. But he'll be in mini stacks for me for sure, a fixture in game stacks. Kenyon Drake did blow up in week 6, but still had just 24 adjusted opportunities. If that game inflates his popularity, I'm okay being a bit lower than consensus on Drake. He's kind of game stacks only for me right now, and he's 3rd on the list behind Hopkins and Kirk. So, Brandon, how are you viewing this Cardinals offense? I think the big talking point is talking points are Hopkins relative to the studs and Kirk as a value play.
So I love Christian Kirk. I always do. The salary, $5,400. I won't say he can like bust open a slate, but we saw, last week
that last year.
But with that, now he has DeAndre Hopkins. Like
that doesn't matter. Hopkins doesn't get any usage.
I think Christian Kirk being, at 5,400 makes him one of. I think he's probably the 3rd best play below 6,000 at wide receiver behind Higgins and Cooks.
Okay, so you put him above Marquez Valdez-Scantling?
I do.
I agree.
I like this offense. I like this game a lot. Obviously, I like the Packers game, but Kirk, I think, is at least. Yeah, they got him that creative touchdown. When he's healthy, he can be really good, and he hasn't. Seems like he hasn't been healthy. He got hurt last year and just kind of wasn't quite himself. So if he's healthy, I think he is kind of a key part to this offense, and he gets such good downfield work. His ADOT can be extremely high. So in this spot, I like Kirk a lot. And then for Hopkins, relative to the studs, it's really hard to nitpick like anybody at the top for a receiver, but I would probably put like you got to factor in that salary. Is it Devontae over Hopkins, right? I think that's pretty.
I feel very good saying Devontae over Hopkins
for $100 savings, and then honestly, assuming that Ridley and Julio are good to go, I might go like.
So
Ridley.
Here's the way I was doing my piece for Friday, my situations to monitor, and I actually ranked these guys, and I feel pretty good about the conclusion I came to there. So the conclusion I had was considering salary, Devontae 1, DK Metcalf 2.
I don't know.
Calvin Ridley 3, Tyler Lockett 4, Julio 5, Hopkins 6.
So I was just looking at those top 4, but I think I'm on the same page ranking those top 4 if I don't include the Seahawks guys.
Okay.
Where do you rank? You meant
just out of curiosity, where do you rank the Seahawks guys relative to the Falcons guys?
Based on salary, above.
Yeah. Like I said, I think that Metcalf is the best receiver on the slate considering salary.
Yeah, I think that's fair. He's
him or Higgins, one of the two.
Yeah. It's as much as I love T. Higgins, and I know the salary gap is different, I think the path for DK Metcalf to get shut down is infinitely lower. So I'm going to go Metcalf still number 1, but T. Higgins is still the best low salary play for me, a wide receiver.
Metcalf will probably see Patrick Peterson, but that doesn't really scare me in 2020 anymore. So personally, I know that he's had like games where he has done well against opposing top receivers. I don't personally care too much with DK Metcalf. So I'm okay putting Metcalf number 1 personally. Maybe it puts a couple extra targets to Tyler Lockett, but I think I want to stick to what I said on the week 5 recap where I'm just sticking with DK. I was too slow on that, but I think I'm good going DK number 1 now. So I agree that Kirk is above MVS, and I agree that he's below Cooks and Higgins. So I think we're on the same page there with him. So makes me feel better to know that we're in lockstep on him because I was having some trouble with him specifically within that game. What about Kenyon Drake? He's 6,000. So Kenyon Drake at 7,000 was an easy cross-off because he wasn't getting passing game work. If he's popular this week, I think he's also an easy cross-off. But if people don't chase the points, I'm okay with him. I think that he's similar to the other running backs in that range, similar to the other receivers in that range as well. So what's your view on Kenyon Drake at 6,000?
The reason I've always had it hard with Drake is that he plays a lot of snaps, and that's pretty consistent in an offense that I feel good with. Obviously, the big drawback is the receiving work and that he can get phased out. But I think for the salary, he's much more in play than I would like to admit. I don't know what the popularity ends up being after his big game on Monday, but he would be he's in the conversation for a play, provided that I'm heavy on that game in general and anticipating
he's in game stacks now for you, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I agree.
I think he has to be.
I agree because he makes it easier to get to Russ and Kyler, and I think that's helpful. I will say he's 10th in tags right now. He is ahead of DeAndre Swift, who is 61 in that range. Ahead of, I don't know if Justin Jackson has any tags. Maybe I'm the only person. Oh, no. Okay, he does. He's ahead of Antonio Gibson, I believe. Yep. So he's probably going to have popularity. I'm guessing people will chase those points. But I think for game stacks, I'm okay. I think the way that this is a slight tangent, but I think the way that I'm viewing the mid-range or lower end running backs is my core will be the 5 we've talked about in the stud range. And then we talk about this with PGA a lot, where I will differentiate a lot in my value plays, make sure I'm not overexposed to any one individual, take some swipes at guys I think have a realistic path to some sort of a ceiling game, maybe don't have the best floor. Drake will be in that rotation. Do you agree with that overall process for this week?
Yeah, because running back's not great in the low end. I think Drake has about as good a shot to put up, the best game from guys like below 65.
Yeah.
So that doesn't mean that that's something I want to have high exposure to.
Yeah.
But he's in this game environment, I think, one of the better low salaried running backs now that the salary's down to kind of account for all of his limitations.
I agree. So let's move on to the bookmaker section here in just 1 second. But first, betting on the NFL is great. Betting on the NFL risk-free is even better. FanDuel Sportsbook is giving you a chance to bet on Week 7 of the NFL risk-free with their exclusive same-game parlays. Simply place a 3-leg or more parlay on any NFL Week 7 game to be eligible. If you win your bet, or if you don't win your bet, I should say, FanDuel will refund your bet up to $10 in site credit. What do you have to lose? Must be 21 plus and present in New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Illinois, West Virginia, Indiana, Colorado, or Iowa. Refund issued as a non-withdrawable site credit and expires in 7 days. Max refund $10. Terms apply. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In West Virginia, visit 1-800-GAMBLER.net. In Indiana, call 1-800-9-WITH-IT. In Colorado, 1-800-522-4700. In Iowa, 1-800-BETS-OFF. Let's take a look at what bookmakers are saying about this slate. Outside of the games we discussed and the trends discussion, the highest total is in Nashville for the Steelers and the Titans. That's at 51.5 right now. It did open at 52.5 and went down, but 85% of the money is on the over. The Titans do not have left tackle Taylor Lewan. The Steelers don't have linebacker Devin Bush. So with that considered, is this a game you are looking to stack or no?
I mean, I'm still having Derrick Henry flashbacks. The Steelers have been basically the Steelers and Buccaneers are the two matchups where I really want to avoid at running back. You take Taylor Lewan out of the equation. I don't know nearly as much as you do about how that's going to affect this offense. I'm going to have it's more likely that I have mini stacks of this game, which is basically back and forth stacks, but without the quarterbacks.
Yeah.
So like skill position players, I think this game is not as exciting as the total suggests.
Would you rank this one higher or Browns Bengals?
Browns Bengals.
I agree. I think that the Steelers wide receivers are fine. And by the wide receivers, I mean the ones who aren't Greg Ward, which means Deontay Johnson and Chase Claypool. I think Eric Ebron is like not a good play, but like he's a salary saver at tight end. And if I'm going to get a bad score at tight end, I might as well spend less there. That's
what tight end is. That's what.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
So I would say like Deontay Johnson should be someone I like at 58, but I just kind of can't get there because I still have concerns around his ceiling. Like from a yardage perspective, and I don't have that concern around Higgins and Cooks. Am I just like a donkey or what?
I mean, we got asked on the Snakes draft. I don't know if it was last week or the week before, but like T. Higgins or Deontay Johnson. And like for me, with what they get and with Chase Claypool like emerging, I think it's like Higgins has such a better path to like usable games for season long, but then for DFS, like a higher ceiling. I don't really see the ceiling being quite what it is with Deontay now that Claypool is just feasting.
Yeah.
The issue for me with Claypool is the salary of 64. I don't think that's egregious, and I will use him, but he can't be like a core play. Now that
right,
Deontay's
he's not my favorite guy in that range.
So I don't know what exactly to expect.
Well, it's Deontay, but it's also because Robbie Anderson is the exact same salary, and I prefer Robbie straight up pretty easily.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So it's how do you stack this game? I like AJ Brown. I always like AJ Brown at this point. I think his role is a lot better than it was last year in terms of volume. But I don't know if I had to pick one stack, I think it's hard to pinpoint, and that's always a concern for me.
I think the reason that I have concerns about Deontay is that as much as we like him, he's had – so my checklist at receiver is either 85 yards or 2 touchdowns. He has exceeded 85 yards once in his career. I know that Mason Rudolph and Duck Hodges are different than Ben Roethlisberger, but it's not like Ben Roethlisberger is 2018 Ben Roethlisberger right now either. So I just don't know that the yardage upside is there, where, again, I think it is with Higgins and Cook. So will I have some Deontay on Sunday? Probably. Will I feel good about it? Will he be a core play? No and no. I think that's where I'm at. And Claypool below Robbie to me. I'm going to look at the other guys in the range because I didn't want to just say Robbie Anderson. Michael Thomas, if he sits, Emmanuel Sanders is 61. We'll talk about that in a second. But, like, I can get to there. Jamison Crowder is 63. If I think that game is semi-competitive, he makes sense. A.J. Brown is 68. Will Fuller is 69. So I think that there are just other guys in that range I like more than Claypool. I will still, again, I probably will have Claypool, but not near as much as I've had the past 2 weeks.
Yeah. Now, you got to talk to me about Derrick Henry, though.
I don't want to.
But like
I don't want to talk about him.
We can't just ignore it.
Can we? Are you sure?
I mean, I ignored it last week.
So this is a very different situation. The odds that he hits his floor are infinitely higher this week than they were last week. So last week, my calculus with Derrick Henry was, what are the odds he makes me regret not using him? I said 20%, so I used him in 20%. What are the odds he makes me regret not using him this week? A lot lower, given the number of studs at other positions. So I don't know if I'll have any Henry. Like, that could go very poorly, but that's fine. That's kind of, the way I think we have to play things here.
Yeah, I mean, like I talked about this on Monday. I know Henry had that eruption game, but, through 3 quarters, he was at like 108 yards with no touchdowns and was really pacing toward like another sort of 15, 18-point game. You put that against the stingiest in terms of success rate allowed to running backs. That's who he gets this week.
Without his left tackle. And I know that Bush is out, but Lawan being out, I think, is more impactful than Bush being out.
Yeah. So basically what I'm getting at is I'm to the point with Derrick Henry where if he doesn't score twice, which he very well could, or doesn't break a 90-yard run, which is a lot less likely, I don't think he's going to like beat us this week. I think the salary is just too high given everything. So I'm going to be low on Henry once again.
I think I'll take a Brandon this week and just go none. Like, we'll see what happens. I don't like actively try to full fade guys, but I just think on this specific situation, I'm okay doing that. Yeah. The Bills are 13.5-point favorites over the Jets in a game with a 45-point total. The implied total for the Bills is 29.25, which ranks third on the slate. The problem is that we need the Jets to keep pace, as we saw last week at the Dolphins. So how much are we talking about here with Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs? Are they 20 lineup people or no?
As in, if I'm playing a 20 max, would I play?
Yeah.
Maybe one, because you could just play those two and then run it back with Jameson if you wanted. And there's really not a whole lot else you can do with that.
Well, the good thing is that, okay, so I think that's right, because if you're going to use one lineup, you want to make sure that one lineup is the right combination. If this game goes off, the right combination will be Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs, Jamison Crowder.
Yeah, and along with that, then it's basically I would go chalky and the best process plays everywhere else. And I know, yes, the odds that all those guys hit in the same stack, like I understand it, but I also don't want to, I don't want to spend 5-10 lineups on this stack trying to hit the right combination elsewhere, because the odds of this one staying close seem very, very low.
I could not agree more. I think that's spot on. So let's move on here to the Saints. They are tied with the Bills for the third highest implied total on the slate. They're 29.25 in their matchup with the Panthers. It has held steady at that number at 29.25, and 71% of the money is actually on the Panthers here, which I think is fun because, again, if we want to stack a game, we need the other team to keep pace. The public seems to, or at least the money seems to think that the Panthers will do that. So we love Alvin Kamara here. I think that goes without saying. Any other pieces stand out to you? I think assume for right now Michael Thomas does not play.
Stand out, not particularly. The Saints are always problematic for me because they just distribute the ball when Michael Thomas isn't playing. Like it's not like they feed anybody. It's just Kamara for me that I feel good about, especially with the salaries being what they are, like with Manny being 61. And then standouts from the Panthers, Robbie, for sure.
Yep.
If I'm stacking it, I don't mind DJ Moore. And then your boy, Mike Davis, I think he's a fantastic tournament play. Mm-hmm. His salary is $7,700 coming off of a letdown game. He should get like 8 targets, assuming that they're trailing the whole game. But I can't really play him as a core play. Can't really play him in cash games. I'm not there with him. So it's like Kamara and Robbie Anderson, the most obvious stack. But I think that I will have
sometimes obvious is obvious for a reason, So I think that's right. I think I agree. I think that Robbie is top 5 at receiver considering salary.
Yeah.
Although it's tough because the studs are all really good relative to their salaries. Maybe I should be lower. But he's a very good play at wide receiver. I think that Mike Davis is a 20% exposure type guy for me, which is not that high because I like to go pretty hard at running back. Kamara, I think that he is the number 2 running back on the slate considering salary behind Kareem Hunt. So it's Hunt 1 for me, Kamara 2. What about you?
It's probably those two to some degree.
Sure.
Potentially
Kamara 1.
Potentially. Okay. It's hard with the value elsewhere being what it is. So I guess salary considered to be Hunt.
Yeah. Okay. So I think I agree. Would you use Traquan or anyone weird on the Saints if Thomas were to sit?
I mean, Traquan's at home, in that dome. I like Traquan. I don't know. The usage hasn't really been there, and I was tilting because one week I wanted to use him and he scored twice, but I think he had 4 targets in that game. Yeah. And it didn't really work out, so it would have been a real fraudulent. Wow, they've had a lot of good matchups. I don't know. 53. I would put him at least behind Higgins, Cooks, Kirk, and MVS, I think.
I agree 100%, and I think that's the right way to put it. What about relative to Deontay Johnson at 58? I think I prefer Deontay there. I think that's a tipping point for me for Deontay.
I think it is too. Yeah.
Okay.
I'd rather go with Deontay.
Perfect. The Kansas City Chiefs. Here we go. They are 9.5-point favorites against the Denver Broncos. That game opened at 9, and 70% of the money's on the Chiefs. The total has also come down 2 points with just 7% of the money on the over. That's likely because of weather. We'll talk about the weather here because it's the only game with weather on the slate. It may snow during the game, and people probably have flashbacks to last year, Broncos versus Chiefs in Kansas City, where I think the Broncos put up 3 points in Arrowhead in that game where there was some snow, but the wind is just 9 miles per hour. Noah Fant was super banged up during that game. They didn't have KJ Hamler, Jerry Jeudy, Albert Okwuegbunam for that game. So I don't think the Broncos repeat their flop, but I think this game is at least kind of interesting from a stacking perspective. I'm not going to use Drew Lock, but I think it's interesting enough where I can use guys like Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce, and then maybe run it back with Tim Patrick, Jerry Jeudy. Noah Fant is over-salaried, but maybe I could have a sprinkle or two. What about you? How are you viewing this game?
Well, it sounds like you're a little lower on it now than when we talked earlier because you seemed pretty confident. I'm not trying to like put words in your mouth.
No, put words in my mouth. What was I saying? How was I coming off?
I said I feel like I'm going to be underexposed to the Chiefs.
I don't think anyone's going to use the Chiefs.
But underexposed to where they should be for me.
Okay, cool.
Because I think that the probability that this game is a back and forth shootout is very low. I understand that Drew Lock throws it deep. A lot of his passes have not really been catchable.
Yeah, because his receivers have been bad, but now he's got Noah Fant, KJ Hamler. What could go wrong? Also, Matthew Stafford has just as bad of a bad ball rate as Drew Lock, but we're like, oh, Kenny Galladay, yeah.
Okay, so do you want to go on record and tell me that any of the Broncos' current pass catchers are as good as Kenny Galladay?
Define current, because Cortland Sutton is technically a Broncos receiver.
No, Cortland Sutton does not count.
I think Deshaun Hamilton is roughly equivalent to Kenny Galladay. Okay. These are number 4. So
the Chiefs are a good pass defense. Drew Lock has been bad, but definitely has what it takes to throw it deep, convert on big plays, keep it close. The odds that hits, I think, are still low. It's still actually one of my favorite game stacks because it's so easy to get hyped up on the Chiefs.
Okay.
But it sounds like we're actually kind of on the same page now.
Yeah, if you're saying it's a game you're willing to stack, if you're saying it's a game you're willing to stack, that's a different vibe than I was getting yesterday.
That is not. I said, but I guess Drew Lock does sling it, so I can see like how it stays close.
Imagine thinking that I actually
pretending
read
like Drew Lock was Patrick
Mahomes.
Mahomes.
You think that I read your Slack messages? You dummy! Come on, this is on you.
For anybody who doesn't know, Drew Lock had 3 really good passes that didn't get caught last week.
No. He also had some good passes that did get caught because he's amazing.
Look, I think this game has paths to being closer. If I thought this was a true blowout, I would not really be in on Travis Kelce. I think I'm going to have a lot of Travis Kelce this week because of the state of tight end.
It's just so tough when I could just go Metcalf instead.
It is, but you also can go with Metcalf and just like not. Like you can build lineups with Travis Kelce and DK Metcalf.
If I use Travis Kelce, I have to use a sub 7,000 running back. Like that is definitive.
If you're flexing a running back, yeah, probably.
True. Fair. Okay.
But why not? So instead, okay, so you're basically getting. I should have this pulled up, but let's say Tyreek is 8,000. Kelce.
I'd rather have Kelce than Tyreek.
But Kelce and T. Higgins or Christian Kirk versus like a Tyreek level salary and Hawkinson or Robert Tonyan or Hunter Henry. Like that's kind of what you can kind of do that 2v2 this week and think about it.
But like that's not going to matter because I'm going to need the T. Higgins and the Brandon Cooks and other slots in my lineup to get to Kelce. Like I'm going to need 2 of them to get to Kelce.
But okay, so let's say you're locked in with Higgins. You can play like Christian Kirk or someone like Deontay or Brandon Cooks in Kelce versus.
Here we go. No. I'm going to do this for you. Okay.
I mean, it doesn't have to be 100% the same salaries. But
you can go with Kareem Hunt and Travis Kelce,
Okay.
or you can go.
If you did a running back, yeah.
Sorry, no, Kareem Hunt and I don't know. This is stupid because there's no one anywhere near Kelce.
Okay, let's say Julio and take your pick of the Hawkinson.
It's game stack. Let's go.
Or Kelce and if you wanted to go game stack, obviously Judy, but like Kelce, Higgins, Kelce, maybe Cooks is.
But the problem is, I'm going to have to use Higgins and Cooks regardless.
But you can use Cooks. Like, let's say Higgins is locked in, he's off the table. You're getting Kelce or Christian Kirk, Kelce or Cooks, Kelce or MVS versus Julio and TJ Hawkinson.
I'd probably go Julio and Hawkinson.
I would probably lean the other direction this week.
Okay. Do you want to? No, I don't want Julio. I'd rather do Ridley. But
we off air, because I'm sure everyone's loving this. We can tabulate up and see the best combos, and I will remove T. Higgins from the equation.
Yeah, because T. Higgins will be in the lineup regardless.
Yes,
he's not the either or here.
Although, okay.
Are you using Demarcus Robinson to change the subject here? He's 52. I was searching FanShare. I just searched KC to see who the highest Chiefs were, and I saw Demarcus Robinson 15th in tags, and I kind of vomited. Wait,
15th
in FanShare in tags,
like overall
on the entire slate.
Oh wow!
I think it's because his salary is a lot lower on a different website, so probably that's why he's up there. I think he's a bad play on FanDuel. Will you use him?
What'd you say he was? 52?
Yeah.
So I'm like, this is a weird thing that I have with the Chiefs, but everyone wants Mecole Hardman, and I understand why. But Demarcus Robinson, generally is as involved, if not significantly more involved than Mecole right now. So when I get prime times, like single game slates, I play a lot of Demarcus Robinson. I don't think I have to get there this week, but if I'm really stacking up this game and I need to get to Mahomes and Kelce, the problem though is nobody in Denver is going to cost you. So I'm probably out on Robinson.
Yeah, I agree. I wanted to talk myself into Mecole Hardman, and then I realized that he ran 13 routes on 34 pass plays in week 6. And I was like, oh, cool. He burned everyone in the 2-game slate. We are going to the next game. I still think I'll have a non-zero number of Mecole Hardman lineups just because he can get downfield usage. And the odds that he serves a bigger role this week are better with Watkins out than they would be with Watkins in. But he's below MVS. He's below Kirk. He's below those other guys. He's above Robinson for me because I know that I'm never going to regret not using Demarcus Robinson. But on a full slate, I should clarify.
Yeah.
I was very okay with using him on Monday, but I'll have a non-zero number of Mecole Hardman lineups. It will not be a big number, but it will be a non-zero number. Let's move into our position-by-position plays based on the salaries over on FanDuel.com. Brendan, starting off with you, who stands out at quarterback?
I like Kyler a lot. That's pretty safe to say, but 8,400, I think that's a really good salary. He's averaged 12.2 rushing FanDuel points per game on 8.5 attempts, 62 yards, 1 touchdown per game. As a passer, he is now back up to the NFL average in per play passing at expected points per drop back. I guess I shouldn't have said per play and per drop back, but you guys know what I mean. He started off pretty slow in terms of efficiency, but ticked back up. He's kind of like the NFL average in both, that per play efficiency, downfield attempt rates, ADOT. It's kind of strange, but after the slow start, that means he's obviously playing a little bit above those numbers to get back to average. Seattle is 28th against the pass, according to numberFire's metrics. So you're basically giving me a league average passer in a great matchup who also runs like crazy and is an amazing rusher. My second love is going to be someone we didn't talk about yet in a game that Jim seems to hate, and I understand why. But okay. It's Justin.
I'm sure you understood why.
It's Justin Herbert. It's 75. I think this is probably a week where I spend up for a lot of the stud quarterbacks, but Herbert has been good. He's averaged 0.24 passing net expected points per dropback. League average is 0.14, and every single one of his matchups so far has come against a top 12 opponent. So he's been good. He's like 4th or 5th against top 12 opponents, along with like Mahomes and Josh Allen, a bunch of guys who are having great seasons. Derek Carr's up there. The Jaguars are 31st in adjusted pass defense. I know that they're favorites, the Chargers by 7.5, but you probably can't convince me that he won't be efficient. If he's already been efficient in tough matchups, he's getting a fantastic matchup here. The odds that he's not efficient seem super low, and we want efficiency at quarterback. Yeah. So I think if you really can't get to anybody else, I like Herbert. I also don't hate Teddy Bridgewater. But
I hate Teddy.
But I think Herbert is I think he's really interesting this week.
Herbert or Burrow?
I almost put Burrow here. I should put Burrow here because I just talked about him a lot, but I think Herbert is someone who I wouldn't have thought about otherwise until I really dug in. So
Herbert or Stafford? Assuming that Marvin does play.
Does play Stafford. If he doesn't, probably Herbert. I think Herbert's just like, again.
Herbert or Matt Ryan?
What's Ryan's salary?
78. He's 300 more.
I think it'd be Ryan with Julio. But again, I try to make a cutoff. I always try to like throw in a lower salaried quarterback.
I think that your analysis is right, where we can expect Herbert to be efficient because the Jaguars are bad. But because the Jaguars are bad, I don't expect volume with that efficiency, whereas I can expect volume and efficiency out of Stafford if Marvin plays, out of Ryan, out of Deshaun, who is $500 more.
Okay, Deshaun's like one of the best plays on the slate again. I can't. I'm trying to.
No, I know what you're doing. I'm just saying. I think that like the odds that Herbert gets to 20 are very good, and I think that Herbert is like he's going to do well. I just can't expect the Jaguars' offense due to certain members of said offense. I can't expect them to keep pace.
I got you.
Yeah. So I like Herbert. I think that he's fine. Just not going to use him in DFS because of my concerns around the Jaguars. My first love is Russell Wilson. Just why not? He's averaging
Justin
30.
Herbert or Russell this week?
It's a tough one, man. Coin flip, really. But Russ, he's averaging 30 rushing yards per game this year, but doesn't have a rushing touchdown yet. And despite the lack of rushing touchdowns, he has 30-plus FanDuel points in 3 of 5 games. He's facing Arizona, and Arizona is, I believe, 5th in points per game allowed this year, but they have faced Jimmy G, Haskins, Stafford, Teddy, Flacco, and Dalton. That's 3 backup quarterbacks, a generational talent in Teddy, and Stafford and Jimmy G. So I think Russ is going to blow some stuff up this week, and I want to get there at 87 if I can. I think that my ranking of the 8,000 or higher guys is Russ 1. However, I don't think Russ is a big enough one where if I need the 300 to go down to Kyler, I would turn it down. I'm saying this because I built a single entry lineup where I needed the $300 and had to go down to Kyler. So it's Russ 1, Kyler 2, Deshaun 3, Rodgers 4. How are you ranking those guys?
I think it's the same.
Okay.
Although I'd be very tempted to go with Mahomes over Rodgers, but I think both the salary and the matchup just would make it a lot easier to say it's Rodgers.
I think that's very fair. The favorite lower salary guy for me is Matthew Stafford. Again, this is dependent on Marvin Jones playing, but Stafford's $500 lower than everyone else in the big games we want to stack, and $500 does go a long way this week. Stafford flopped in a plus matchup last week, but it was because the opposing team did nothing. Jags. The Falcons are better than the Jaguars, so I think the odds that his opponent keeps pace this week are higher. Again, I think the optimal play is to spend up this week, but Stafford is my favorite of the non-studs, and I will need that salary relief a good chunk of the time this week. So Matthew Stafford, I think, is a good play.
Okay, so you have 75. Let's say for whatever reason you plug in your quarterback last. Marv's out. You have 75 left. Who's your favorite quarterback?
Burrow.
Yeah.
Just because I feel better about his opponent not sucking.
Yeah. I can see that. I said, I think Burrow's like a 1A, 1B with Herbert for me in the event. I was going to write up Stafford, but you already did. So
okay, yeah. So if Marv sits, I go Burrow. If Marv plays, I go Stafford.
Okay.
Okay, let's move to running back. Who do you have there?
This was a bit of a
Easy.
crisis for me.
Our snake draft is going to be weird because I think we might all have a receiver in the flex potentially.
It's
Well,
possible.
I don't know. We'll see.
It's possible.
Yeah.
But you took the 3, I think, best plays.
You took Aaron Jones before I got to the sheet. What do you mean?
I don't think I did that. Did I?
Yeah, you did. He was on the sheet. He was on the sheet
maybe.
when I got there. You made the sheet. You put Aaron Jones down. You sent it to me.
Yeah, maybe I did. But
Yeah.
I like Aaron Jones a lot, and I usually don't. But so I love Alvin Kamara for sure, but I like the salary bump down to Aaron Jones as well at 85. I think salary is pretty tough this week. So I like the savings. In 3 games with Devontae playing, I know you looked at his 2, but I looked at 3 when he played. Aaron Jones is at 27.3 adjusted opportunities per game, 6.3 targets, gets a lot, pretty much all the red zone work. Houston's obviously gettable on the ground. They're 25th in rushing success rate allowed to running backs. Just got, demolished last week by Derrick Henry. So I think he rates out as good as a play, salary considered, as Kamara. So I like Aaron Jones a lot, and I did put him first, so I'm remembering that now.
Would you rank him first among priorities at running back? I think he's the 3rd for me.
Yeah.
Because I go Kareem Hunt 1, Alvin Kamara 2, Aaron Jones 3.
Yeah, I mean, I like Kamara way more, but I don't want to pretend like the salary is like the same. Yeah. So that's tough. But I think those are probably the top 3 for me.
Okay, cool.
And then, so that means my other 2 loves are not necessarily my favorites. And honestly, it was hard to find guys I really felt good about. But I'm going to go with Mike Davis, number 2, 7,700. That's quite high for a heavy underdog. I don't think he's unplayable, I guess, in a cash game format, but I think he's way better suited for tournaments. The Panthers are 7.5-point underdogs. It's hard to justify that salary for Davis, especially coming off the down week with the 3 targets, just 12.5 FanDuel points last week. So I can't imagine people really flock to Mike Davis, but Chicago is a tough matchup. He had averaged 8.3 targets per game entering last week since McCaffrey's injury. So I think it's still a great role for the salary. Worried a little bit about the game flow, but he should get targets. So my 3rd love is going to be James Robinson at 64. I think this is another reason why I'm more okay with Herbert and the Chargers in this kind of game in general as a game that really nobody's on. Robinson has had at least 4 targets in every game outside of week 1. He's averaging about 35 receiving yards per game, which is definitely no joke. And it's important. Those points count on FanDuel. They're not rushing. It's not a full point per catch, but like yardage and catches do count on FanDuel, so it helps.
No, receiving yardage gets thrown out the window. What do you mean?
He is 15th in adjusted opportunities per game since week 2 among all running backs. I think that's viable. It's obviously a much better ranking on the main slate alone, but he hasn't scored on the ground since week 3, so I think he could regress there. Obviously, they're also underdogs, but like I said, I'm strongly considering receivers at flex. Not on 100% of lineups, anything like that, but
I'm thinking like 30%.
Yeah. And
20 to 30.
Usually we're at 0.
Yeah. So that's where we're at this week. Receivers really good in spots. Running back is really not in spots. Before I do mine, because I don't have any of these guys in my picks, if you had to pick 2 running backs below $7,000 to use, whom would you pick?
Below
like you have
7.
To. You cannot use a receiver.
Boy, I wish we knew if Le'Veon was out. Well, I guess.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Below.
If Le'Veon's out, Clyde Edwards-Helaire is a really good play.
Yeah, but he's 7, so I guess not even below.
Right.
If I have to use, I'd have to go with Robinson. And
like you'd use Robinson over Kenyon Drake and David Johnson.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, his target floor is basically their ceiling.
Yeah.
I would go Robinson and then Drake.
Okay. I think that DJ and Drake are my favorites. I will say that I will have some sprinkles of DeAndre Swift and sprinkles of Justin Jackson. My concern with Justin Jackson is ceiling because he could get dead and Singletaried where he has a good adjusted opportunity number, but like doesn't get goal line work and thus has troubles cracking 20 FanDuel points. But I think like Justin Jackson is talented enough to score on a longish touchdown. I think the Jaguars are trashy enough to allow a longish touchdown. The people's running back, Justin Jackson. So I would say Jackson is up there. As far as Swift goes, like if he'll be popular, then like he's just whatever, I dump out. But there is a path to usage for him, and we literally saw that path last week. He gets the kind of touches we want because he did have 3 goal line rushes in week 6. Again, they were all in the same drive, so it kind of was one goal line rush. But he also gets targets, and we know he's very talented as a receiver. Like you said, if Marv is out, he may get more targets. So I would say I'd rather use both DeAndre Swift and Justin Jackson than James Robinson.
Okay. I mean...
Okay, so let's talk about my actual picks at running back here. Alvin Kamara, he's good. No need to overthink it. He is at home in a plus spot, too good to pass up. In his lone game with Michael Thomas, if Thomas plays, Kamara had 12 carries and 8 targets. He's averaging 30.2 adjusted opportunities per game for the full season. The Panthers are 23rd in success rate allowed to opposing backs, so I would say Kamara is a lock for cash games, lock for tournaments. Just use him and don't think about it too much. My second love is Kareem Hunt. He has not blown up without Chubb yet, but this is easily the best spot he's had because the first 2 games came against the teams ranked 1st and 9th in success rate allowed to opposing running backs, whereas the Bengals are 19th. He had 28 adjusted opportunities in their non-blowout in a game that they won. They're slight favorites here. He's $7,100 in a bell cow. I think that Kareem Hunt is the best running back on the slate considering salary. The third guy is Chris Carson. And I'm going out of order based on salary, but I think Hunt is a way better play than Carson, which is why I put him there. So I think Carson is a great way to pivot off the Seahawks pass catchers because he's actually been the Seahawks' highest scoring position player in 3 out of 5 games this year, which is wild to me. To me, it's just wild. I don't know if that surprised anyone else. It surprised me. But that's even while being limited in week 1. He got hurt in week 3. So I prefer other guys around here, but I do want to highlight Carson as being a low popularity route for getting exposure to that game, which I think is very valuable. So Chris Carson, a tournament play for me.
What I don't want to linger too long on running back. I know we've been here a lot, but Joe Mixon, if he plays and is like...
Well, if he doesn't play, Gio at 48 becomes the value play. Like, I have concerns about upside there, but I'm okay having concerns about upside with a guy at 48 versus a guy who is 61.
Yeah.
So if there's no Mixon, I think Gio is a guy you just lock into cash game rosters and have a good amount of exposure to in tournaments.
If Mixon plays?
If he gets in a full practice by Friday, then I would say Joe Mixon would be kind of in the Aaron Jones tier, right? Like not in the same plane for me as Hunt and Kamara, but like really good, right?
Yeah, I think they're like the top of tier 2, probably.
Okay, I agree. Let's go to wide receiver. Who do you have there?
I went with Calvin Ridley. I think that people will probably point chase with Julio, maybe not, but that would be fine by me. I think also there's significant salary savings and $500 to go from Devontae down to Calvin Ridley. I don't want to kind of put them in the same tier because salary-wise they're really not. But I think Ridley at 84 is a really easy sell this week in this matchup. He's got 22% of the targets in games with Julio. That's 9.7, as I mentioned already. Gets downfield work. He's a high ADOT receiver, and that's really what you want in a shootout. His ADOT's 12.7 yards. And I think he deserves to be kind of close to that tier of Devontae anyway, once you consider the salary. Maybe it's not a big enough savings for you, but I really like Ridley this week. My second love is A.J. Brown. I'm not that high on this game overall, but I really like A.J. Brown. The volume's been a lot better this year. His salary is reasonable at 68. He can still bust open a slate, especially with his, he gets, end zone targets, and we know that he can break a long play. The Steelers, not quite what they have been on pass defense. They're 16th in target success rate allowed to receivers. Darius Slayton, Travis Fulgham did both go for big games against the Steelers. Randall Cobb got to 17.5 FanDuel points, and Browns averaged 8 targets, 2 red zone targets. in his healthy games. Just zero point 0.7 downfield targets, which isn't great. His ADOT's only 9.5 yards. It was in the 13 range last year, but I think it should be a tight game at least. And for that, I like Brown, who's just super efficient. And then my third love, I made sure I got to the sheet first so I could get T. Higgins. We talked about him plenty, but I think he's the best low salaried receiver play. He's second on the Bengals in target share at 22% since his role shift. In week 3, that's 8 targets, 3 downfield attempts. He's just like kind of a matchup nightmare. He gets a lot of high leverage looks too. So I think Higgins is the best play down here. I think you're talking about Brandon Cooks, but I also like Christian Kirk. Jerry Jeudy, Tim Patrick are in the conversation. Tyler Boyd's there.
I thought their quarterback was trash. What do you mean?
That's exactly what I said, yes. And then
I'm going to get you to quit before the end of the podcast.
This might make us quit, but Deebo Samuel is 54.
He's the only guy in that game I would kind of consider.
Yeah. So I don't feel great about it, but I mean, he's down there. If we're really scraping for value.
Yeah. So you had T. Higgins. I think that Higgins is either 1 or 2 as far as wide receivers on the slate considering salary. The other guy there is DK Metcalf. I said on the Week 5 recap that I had finally seen the light and I was converted to being a Metcalf stan over Lockett. So I'm going to stick with that here. Metcalf, at least 92 receiving yards in every freaking game this year, which is disgusting. He has 24% of the overall targets with 46% of the deep targets and 18% of the red zone targets. And we get him indoors, which is awesome. So that red zone number could go up. I think that Metcalf is way under salaried at 73. I know we'll see Patrick Peterson, but I don't frankly care that much. DK Metcalf, no matter what. My second love is Robbie Anderson. His salary doesn't reflect his role yet, which is fine by me. For the full season, Robbie has 27% of the overall targets, 33% of the deep targets, and 26% in the red zone. He has at least 55 yards in every game. He has 99 or more in 4 of 6 games. He's $6,400, and we should see the Panthers throw the ball a lot. They should throw the ball efficiently, and it's also a Teddy Bridgewater revenge game. Don't let the haters let you forget that is the Teddy Bridgewater revenge game here, which totally matters. I'm sure that Teddy seems very nice, which is unfortunate, and I wish he were more angry and vengeful, but that's okay. I also love Brandon Cooks, Will Fuller, Macy, more Jair Alexander than Cooks this week, which could push a couple extra targets Cooks' way. With that said, both these guys run in the slot a quarter of the time per Pro Football Focus, so I honestly think Fuller's a good play. I just like Cooks a little bit more this week than usual because of the matchup for Fuller. Cooks has 22% of the overall targets and 25% of the deep targets. He's had at least 95 receiving yards twice this year, so I'm going team speed this week. Metcalf, Robbie, Cooks, and let's see if they can burn some people. But again, I think that Higgins is a really good play too. Not quite team speed, but hey, team very big wide receiver. Why not? Tight end, who you got there?
I'm gonna go with, like I said, Travis Kelce at the top. I know it's a lot to pay for a tight end, 79, but I don't really think anybody else is in his tier this week, especially with George Kittle's matchup. He's got a 24% target share. It's 8.7 per game, 1.7 red zone targets per game, nearly a downfield target per game. It's a pretty strong ADOT for him at 7.6 yards downfield. I view him like I should have viewed Derrick Henry, I think, last week. Nobody's really nobody can kind of match him at tight end. And with value at receiver being what it is, again, we did the comparison, the 2v2. I like Travis Kelce a lot more than I typically do. My second love, and I think all of our tight end loves this week are kind of begrudging, but Austin Hooper at 54. Since Nick Chubb left or has been injured 3 games ago, Hooper actually leads the Browns in target share at 24%. It's 25% if you don't include the blowout last week. So kind of the first soft matchup for the Browns in a month too, if you go back through the game logs. And the Bengals have allowed 5 tight ends to get to at least 9.8 FanDuel points against them this year.
I think he's probably the best low salary guy. Probably. I don't know. Yeah. I like TJ Hawkinson. Hawkinson's the only guy who has maintained any kind of role since Golladay came back because he has 17% of the overall targets and just 1 deep target in those 3 games, but he also has 7 in the red zone across 3 games. So he's lowish salary exposure to a great game. I'll take that every time. I think the Hawkinson works for sure. I also like Hunter Henry. I'm not in love with this game.
No, that game sucks.
I'd rather get my tight end in a game that I expect to be non-competitive than my quarterback, personally. So, yeah, Hunter Henry, he has 19% of the targets in the games that Herbert has started, with the caveat that neither or none of those games have been with both Keenan Allen and Mike Williams. Henry also has just 2 downfield targets and 1 in the red zone in that time. So it's pretty meh, but he's $5,800. I can get there. I prefer Hooper over him. What?
The fact that you can't name 3 non-Kelsey tight ends that you
you're using this as a Kelsey thing. Okay, I thought
you want to play,
but like
gives a lot of
credence. I can't
credence.
name that many wide receivers that I want to use in the low end. So like it's the same thing. I prefer Brandon Cooks, I prefer DK Metcalf and TJ Hawkinson over Travis Kelce and Brandon Cooks.
Okay. I don't know that I do this week.
Also, we forgot to point out, as David pointed out on YouTube, it's a Randall Cobb revenge game. So we forgot to note that. I'm not using Randall Cobb. I love a good revenge game. I prefer the Teddy revenge game, but we should note that.
Usually you're on top of the revenge games.
Yeah, well, no, not with Randall Cobb. Defense, who do you have there?
Defense was tough to look for, an affordable unit. If you're not spending up for Buffalo or don't fight me, Jim, but Kansas City, I think.
No, I agree. They're fine too.
I think it gets pretty bleak quickly. I don't hate the Steelers at 4,300, but I'm going to go with the Saints here at 4,000 against Teddy Bridgewater. It's not so much that I don't like the Panthers offense. Obviously, we love Robbie. We're in on Mike Davis, probably DJ Moore to some degree, even Teddy himself. But I think it's expected game flow. The Panthers should be trailing. Based on Pro Football Focus's data, the Panthers have the 8th worst expected pass blocking matchup among 22 teams on the main slate. And, I mean, you have to throw in, yes, it's a revenge game, but New Orleans should have an idea of what gives Teddy problems.
Also, Joe Brady used to work for them, and he's the OC for Carolina. They probably know his scheme pretty well. That matters, too. So I think that the Panthers are fine. The Saints are fine. I think that's okay. My preferred option is Washington because Chase Young is going to ruin Andy Dalton's day. Like, poor Andy. I feel bad. The Cowboys are using their 3rd string left tackle. Their only remaining guy up front is Zach Martin. He may not play because of a concussion. So for $3,800, I think that Washington is the best defense on the slate. If you want a lower salaried option, I think that Cincinnati is viable. At $3,600, I believe. I think that Dallas is viable in the same game at $37, just because it's still Kyle Allen. So I think that's the main ones I would highlight for the lower salaried options. I think New Orleans is in play too, as you said.
Yeah, I mean, defense is always tricky. I think it's a little trickier this week if you're spending down.
That is all the time that we have for today. Brandon, any final thoughts for you on this Week 7 slate?
No, I think we covered just about everything for this one.
Yeah, pretty much. Just dig really hard for value plays. I think that if we find, if there's an injury that happens Thursday that opens up value, take it. Because there's so much good stuff at the high end. Yeah. Take the value where you can get it. If it's Gio Bernard, sick. I'll take it. If it's someone else, take it. I think we just, take the path least.
Take it.
Get those studs and see what happens. That is all the time that we have for today. Back again on Monday to recap the Week 7 slate and talk about all the big takeaways from a DFS perspective, talking role changes, injuries, anything else that may crop up. So make sure you are subscribed to the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed. No matter where you get your podcasts, you can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, the Google Play Store, iHeartRadio, I think radio.com, because why not? We are all those places. And also, if you like what you hear, leave us a rating and review. Austin Swain broke down UFC 254. That is posted on the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed and a NASCAR podcast coming tomorrow there. We'll also be recording the Monday one live on YouTube at 9 a.m. Eastern, so make sure you're subscribed to the FanDuel YouTube page as well. Brandon, if people have questions for you on Twitter, where can they find you there?
I'm at Gadula13, GDULA13.
And I am at Jim Sannes, JimSannes. You can also follow the FanDuel Podcast Network at FanDuel Podcast. Big thank you to Calvin Theobald, our video producer, for running the video side of things here today. Thank you, Cal, as always. And thank you to everyone for tuning in. Good luck with your Week 7 lineups. We'll talk to you once again on Monday. Don't forget to enter the Listener League too. FanDuel.com/league/Listener League or the link in the podcast page. This has been the Heat Check Fantasy Podcast powered by numberFire.